Good, good day. We are back. We are back, right, LaJoy? We
Yes.
are back. And we are back with our doctoral chairperson, Dr. Ruby Burgess. And we are so excited to have this wonderful conversation about how to teach African American history in this time, in this current atmosphere that we have going on. What you got, LaJoy?
I'm just excited to be back. We've been out for a little while, but it was a nice little break. And I'm looking forward to the conversation and speaking with Dr. Burgess again, because she has been had a great impact on both of our lives. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Dr. Burgess,
Thank
can you
you.
introduce yourself to us?
I am Ruby Burgess. I live in a little tiny town. I call it a village, but it's a little tiny town in north central Arkansas, headed to northwest Arkansas, more west than middle of the state or east. I grew up here. I went to college for my undergraduate degree at College of the Ozarks, which is also in Arkansas. But I did a master's, another bachelor's, because my first bachelor's was in business, and I didn't like working in business. Worked for 3 years in accounting and said, this is not me. Went back in early childhood education and went to Pacific Oaks College in Pasadena, California, where I did the master's and the bachelor's. Then I worked for a number of years, 8 years actually, before I went back for the doctorate in multicultural education at the University of Massachusetts. I have always been interested in African American history. And although I had those other degrees, I am what I call myself a closet historian. So I do a lot of reading, as you can see, on Black history, multicultural education, and lots of other things, lots of other topics also. So that's it. My interest is in culture and research interest is in culture and how it impacts family life as well as teaching and learning.
Thank you. Yeah, because when I was going through my trauma, but it was fun trauma. I was I didn't think about culture. I mean, I was talking about I'm going to do culturally relevant, but you opened a lot of my mind, my thinking about culture, because culture doesn't necessarily mean just African American. It could be so much more and so much broader. So I had to really get into it. And yes, she had to talk me off the ledge many, many times, many, many times. Well, today we know what's going on within our community right now, or within the country, within international waters, everything we know what's going on. And there seems to be let's see, a hit out on African Americans and their history and what should be taught, what should not be taught. If you're going to teach African American history, we don't want you to talk about slavery. We don't want you to talk about the civil rights, now that the civil rights have been gutted to a certain point. We don't want to talk about anything. We just want to say that after slavery, we was a good bunch of people. We were able to go and vote. We were able to do this, that, just make it look like we was just slave freed. Now we all live in a prosperous life. What is it that as educators, because we have a lot of educators who want to teach the truth. They want to teach everything. But right now they're having a lot of issues with it. So what are your thoughts on where do we start and how do we start? Or they start?
Okay, first let me say, like I said, my discipline is multicultural education. Although I studied African, and when I did my dissertation, I did it on cultural determinants of behavior in African American teachers and students. So I didn't look at anyone else. I just looked at those things that I knew were culturally based that African American teachers did with African American students, and those things that were culturally based that African American students used in order to learn better. So let me say first I'll say that. Then the other thing is that the current culture, the current socio-political milieu or environment doesn't like anybody unless they are white Anglo-Saxon Protestant males.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's just it.
Mm-hmm.
So and they have to be elite. They have to be rich. If they are poor, um, they aren't liked either. So therefore, these times are bad for everyone. They're bad for us, particularly because we have our own history in this country. It
Mm-hmm.
is not the history that is shared by white people, be they or European Americans, be they poor, middle class, rich. We don't share history with them. But I have to say that neither do Native Americans share history with them. Um, Latinas don't share history with them. Asians don't share history with them because all of us had our own histories within the boundaries of this country, within the contiguous United States. And if you get to Hawaii and the native Hawaiians, and you get to Alaska and the native Alaskans, they don't share history with the invaders either. Okay. So everyone has to figure out how they will help their own children
Mm-hmm.
maintain their cultural integrity as well as know their history. As teachers, we have ways of doing that. Now, as I told LaJoy and Lorna, I was going to share some books that I think teachers, any teachers looking at this podcast, might be able to use to help them know the things, some of the things that they can do. I'm going to talk about what I know was done when I grew up, but I'm going to share this book right now, and it's called Fugitive Pedagogy. And it's really talking about teachers during segregated times who taught their students well quality education as well as their own history. And so it's called Fugitive Pedagogy, and it is based upon Carter G. Woodson's ideas about how we should educate our people. For those of you listening to the podcast who do not know Carter G. Woodson, in 1929, he wrote a book about the miseducation of Black people.
Yep.
He wrote that in 1929, and he was talking about how our history was not taught. That prompted him to develop some literature through which we could teach our children. Now, because I went to segregated schools in this little tiny town of Morrilton, Arkansas, many things were done using these strategies. So we used, along with the U.S. history book that the district provided for us, we used Carter G. Woodson's book also. So was that a way that our teachers were saying, yeah, 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 this is American history, but our children need to know our history? And Carter G had written in eighth grade U.S. history from an African American perspective. Back then it was called colored or whatever, because it was 1929. But he wrote a history book, and we actually used it. So that
So
was
yeah, you did along with it. So you had the
along with the
curriculum.
other. So then
So
you could compare stories.
okay.
which is another strategy that can be used today. You don't have to say, I'm teaching Black history. You don't have to say, any teacher, they don't have to say that. They can say, I've got three stories here about the American Revolution. We're getting ready for the 250th year of the celebration of white liberation from England, not anybody else's liberation. Okay.
Mhm.
So you can say, I'm going to give you this story by a Native American person who was deep in it because there were many Native American groups on the East Coast, and most of it took place in New England. So you had the whole Iroquois Council, you had them writing, they were telling stories. They have stories about the American Revolution. African Americans who participated in the American Revolution, thinking they were
Mhm.
going to be free. They have their stories. And then you have the stories that are in the textbooks, which is the European story. It is
Mhm.
nobody else's story, but the European story. Now, what do? You take those three stories or four stories, whatever you find, but at that point, there would have been the Africans, the natives, and the Europeans. That's about it in what they call the United States, or what was later called the United States. At that time, it was the colonies. So you can
Okay.
take all of those stories. You can divide the kids into groups. You can
Mhm.
have them read the stories. You can have them highlight the stories. You can have them come back and say, so what did your story say? Well, who was that? You don't have to tell them it was Native American, it was African American. You have to just give it to the kids. Let them
Uh-huh.
read the stories. Let them interpret the stories. Let them say what they thought the people felt. Teachers have, and I have another book called Textured Teaching. And in it, she has wonderful questions that you can ask to keep all cultures engaged. She is, this is Django Parish, which I know you all Joy, you know the Django Parish, who
Yeah.
did um, culturally sustaining pedagogy,
Mhm.
where
Hmm.
all of these strategies are based upon that. How you keep, but there are strategies for the whole classroom. All right. So, and she has some wonderful questions in there that once you do one of those with the kids, then you can go to a book like this and design questions that will bring out everybody's story.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So we're focusing on, which is a good idea, because that's what I was reading too. Your focus, even though you are having the African American, but you're just making it just pretty much like what, I forgot what they call it, where you just oh, I don't know what's
And
wrong with me
it's,
lately.
go ahead, LaJoy. What did
Go
you
ahead,
say?
LaJoy, what you
Well,
saying?
I was just thinking about when we had a discussion earlier on one of our other episodes about AI. You remember when I brought up that sometimes
Yeah.
we can't teach specifically or directly, but the good thing about AI, and I know a lot of people don't like technology, but these kids now, they're so engaged through technology,
Mm,
giving them questions to go seek and find their own answers and then come back and discuss it as a class is similar to what Dr. Burgess is saying. You give them articles of different experiences without pointing out what you're bringing to them so they can come back and share what they learned from those readings and their understandings, which brings that conversation in play. And I like that way of looking at it because I know I understand better when I call it discovery learning. You
yeah,
discover
Right.
and you're
right.
bringing back what you learned, and they bring back their point of view, how they understood it, and those conversations lead to a more collective understanding. They could probably, to understand each other, our differences
Yes.
and our likenesses. I want to say because a lot of times through those stories, you'll see where even though we're labeled differently, we're so much the same and our experiences are very similar.
Yeah.
And I think that will bring that understanding to students which is that's why I love that perspective on how to bring it into the classroom.
Exploration. That's
Yeah,
it. I was
exploration, discovery, exploration, discovery, and exploration.
exploration. I couldn't get that. It was like right there. Exploration. Yeah. Because that's what
Yeah.
I love about, because I like that. I like when you give it to them. Because remember, one of the things, because Janice Hale kept saying, we look out, then we start focusing in. We are
Hmm.
looking, and it's like we get the whole picture, but we have to break it apart. And that's what those stories are. We already know what the whole picture is. Now we're going to break it apart, and then we're going to put it together and see how it's supposed to link. So
Hmm.
that's what I like about that.
And who was experiencing what during
Hmm.
the American Revolution?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who was experiencing what during the Civil War? Who was experiencing what through during the Mexican American War, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
when so they see that, and then and you don't, as I said, you don't have to tell them it's this because of the times. We wouldn't say this is the so and so experience or this is the so and so experience. We just say we have different experiences here of the same event. Read the stories, come back and tell us what those experiences are. They'll know who it is.
Mm-hmm.
They'll know who it is. Now, this is a method used by James Banks, who is like the father of multicultural education in
Mm-hmm.
the United States.
Yeah.
He is the emeritus person. But when he wrote his first book, which was like in 70, somewhere 75, 74, he did it. He said, you don't teach from one perspective, and you teach through events. And then you have the event in the center, and he had a graph. In the center was the event, and then he had Native American, African American, European American, and
Mm-hmm.
he had what I call the five major cultural groups. There are many ethnic groups within those cultural groups, but the five major ones: European, African, Asian, Native, and Hispanic. And he would have those. And then all of the students had to research all of them. But that was back when you could say, this is multicultural. You're going to learn about Native Americans. You're going to learn about African Americans. You're going to learn. And that was the way all I did was modify his curriculum design
Okay.
with the idea that I gave you. It's a modification of James Banks's curriculum design. Now, anybody can take that and do it. So that's another reference. James Banks, who I think James passed away a couple years ago, but he was at the um, the Center for Cultural Studies at the University of Washington in Seattle is named the James Banks, blah, 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 blah. But he is. And he's from Arkansas. He's from a village smaller than mine in Arkansas, in southeast Arkansas, okay? We got 5,000 people. He had about 3,000, okay? And he went to segregated schools too. And
Yeah.
so, what I'm saying, what I found in my research was because students who share a culture with their teachers
Mm-hmm.
don't have to decode what they're saying. They know what they're saying when they say it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the cultures are different. The student then has to work through what the teacher means. And because the student has to work through what the teacher means, that takes time before they can get to doing the task. Okay, Lorna, you have a question, you have a thought. I can see it in your eyes.
No, 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 no. No, I'm just thinking about when I was teaching. One of the things that when I was teaching my African American kids, we knew, like for example, we knew throwing under the bus meant. We knew exactly when I would say, you just threw her under a bus. They understood
Hmm.
it. But my Latino kids was looking at me like, what does that mean? So
Right.
I always had to make sure that I had to not use so much of my code switching with them. I had to consistently say, "Oh, this is what it means," and lay it down that way, so that everybody can be included in whatever the conversation is. So that just made
Hmm.
me remember that. That's all.
Well, there are things that we say and we think everyone understands,
Right.
which is also a code switching thing, even though it doesn't seem like it's code switching. And I will give a personal example. When I was growing up, European Americans would say to me, "How many people are in your family?" And I always said, "I don't know. I don't know." And then as time rocked on, it was actually at Pacific Oaks, which was at a Quaker institution, and Quakers educationally try to find out what people mean when they say something. So when I was asked, "How many people are in your family?" I said, "I do not know. I'm grown now, right?"
Hmm.
So I'm doing more than saying I don't know. And so, and I think it was, well, I won't call a teacher's name. I can't remember who it was. And she said, "Oh, what do you mean when you say family?" I said, "I mean those who came before, those living, and those yet to come.
Hmm.
I have no way of knowing how many people that is. That's what I mean." She said, "Oh, okay." So I said, "What do you mean when you say how many people in your family? Why do you ask that question?" And she said, "Well, I want to know how many brothers and sisters you have." I said, "Why don't you ask that?"
Yeah.
So you wouldn't call that code switching. You would call that's the cultural difference. Code
Yeah.
switching is code switching. Culture is a different thing. And
Mm,
culture is those belief systems that guide your behavior. So when I said family, my belief system said there was millions of people. When they said family, it meant the people who lived in the household. That's a cultural difference.
mhm,
Okay. So
mhm,
culture is more, it's not the slangs we use. It
mhm.
is the way you see a particular thing. Now, somebody might say, "But you were grown, that's why." But my 4-year-old nephew once said, I had a cousin who was, whom, she was my first cousin. So all of the kids in the family, another cultural trait, all of the kids called all of the first cousins aunts and uncles. We didn't have any cousin this and cousin that. Everybody was aunt and uncle. And
Mm,
so Anita, who was, I'll just say it for the group who's listening to the podcast, she was a cousin sister, meaning a first cousin, but seen as my sister. And she worked as an anchor for a local TV station. And they were going to have a picnic at a park in Hot Springs. And the family was invited, her family. Another nephew, John, said, "Ruby, are they talking about the family? Or are they talking about Nita's children?" I said, "They're talking about Nita and her children." She said, "Oh." He said, "Oh, I want to go to the picnic." But at 4, because of the way he was raised, he understood the difference in the meaning, the cultural difference. He couldn't tell you it was a cultural difference. He could
mhm,
only say, he could only ask the question, and he realized that European Americans saw family differently than African Americans, or Asians, or Latinas, or natives, you know?
Well,
And
that's
we don't share their definitions of family.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. I never thought about it that way. Now, what made me focus a lot on what our contributions, especially when we're in school, I remember my students would say about family reunion. And
Mhm.
I remember, Dr. Burgess, you were telling me that that is something that happened because of the end of slavery. They were bringing their children, they were finding their families. And so that was like the basis of family reunion. And so when I would talk about, or they would talk about their family reunion, I would ask them, what do you do for your family reunion? What is going on within your mindset? And my Latinos or my Latino kids were like, we don't really do family reunions. They are already together. And
Well, no,
I said,
they do
oh,
it every weekend. No,
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
stereotype.
yeah, that's
That's not
it.
true.
Yeah.
But they do it often and don't call it family
Right,
reunion. But they have large family gatherings
right.
regularly,
Mhm.
not particularly for a specific time of the year.
Right, and that's but what I enjoyed was the conversation between all of them. So when we talked about it, the kids were, the African American children were like, well, we do it once every other year, or we may do it every year, and we're doing it. We got to see our family because my mama said you better know your family because you've been in married your little cousin and don't even know you married your cousin. And so I said, well, yeah, that's true, especially in my town. You better
Okay.
know your people. And so, and they were like, well, we always met, and so I like bringing that together. When you bring
Right.
that together and have that conversation, they have a good understanding. And as an educator, we have to use anything that would help us with our instruction. And so that was one of the things I used to love to do.
Well, I was glad you brought that up because that is an event you can have kids, and instead of putting them in randomly in groups, you can have the same group sit down and or divide them out into groups. Actually, I just thought of two ways. Okay, so you can divide them out into groups that are single cultural groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can have Africans, Asians, Latinas, and all of that. And you can, and they, whatever you have in your classroom, that's how many groups you can have. Or you can have big one, or you can break those down depending on how many kids you have in each group. Then you can have them write a small paper. Because remember, you need to keep it skill based.
Mm-hmm.
You need to keep it within the context of what you're teaching. If you're teaching reading, if you're teaching math, if you're teaching science, whatever you're teaching, you've got to give them the assignment has to include whatever the subject matter standards are for the course, what you're doing. All right.
Right.
So you can have them do family reunion. The topic can be family reunion in all of them. And
Mm-hmm.
if you think they don't, you can subtitle family reunion for the different groups in the family. Family gatherings, um, whatever you want to call it. Uh, so family celebrations, so that everybody understands what they're doing and they're describing theirs. But you have built within that the questions would be the skills that you need to teach. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, history. How long have you been doing it? Math on a graph, show how many people attend in from year 19, no, let's go 2020 to 2025. How many times did you have it? Graph how many people attended.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Math and reading, compare the year. What is the average?
I like that average.
How many children? How many youth? How many young adults? How many elders? What's the ratio between?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So everybody's doing their family reunion or family gathering. So that was the first way I thought about it. Now, the other way I thought about it was put in the still you've got the same cultural group together, but what are the differences? Do a comparison of the differences between the way Lorna, your family does it, and the way I do it. How we've been doing it since 1962. How long have you been doing it? Still, you can work in your math, you can work in your reading, you can work in your writing, because everybody is going to write because they're going to write up their report. But everything that you do needs to be skill based. And if you want to go way back in history, I want each group to use that AI and see when family reunions started.
Mhm.
And what AI says, do a little research, is the origins of family reunions. We might find that there were family reunions all over the world.
Right. That's
You
right.
know what you're gonna find.
That's right.
And
That's
they
right.
might have been done in different ways. And they had different traditions. What were the traditions? Just think about the history that can be taught in a broad-based assignment, but you're still teaching your African American history.
You know, I'm not trying to be funny, but
No.
it's like, no, no, seriously, because it's really like it's sneaky, like you sneaking it in there just so that, because remember, I'm in Texas.
Oh
So,
yeah, I'm in
and
Arkansas. Hey,
yeah, I
we
know,
got
oh, I know
we
that's
got
right.
the
I know that.
Learns law. You don't
And
teach
so
nothing
it's
about
like
anybody, you
we
know.
gotta play in there. We gotta be like, okay, just so that you can bring it out.
Well, Lorna and LaJoy, I have always thought good teaching is a lot of work.
Yes.
And I was a teacher educator for 42 plus years, okay?
Mhm.
My students, when they were student teaching, I gave them a rubric. I gave them rubrics before rubrics were popular. I didn't know it was a rubric. I now know it was a rubric, but I didn't know then. I just knew this is my expectation. This is what you have to do. And I said the student on the student teaching one, I said, and I had all this stuff that came from the text and our policies at the university and all that stuff. But the very last thing I said was, if you teach from the textbook and all of its supplementary materials excellently, you will get a C. Anything below a C in teacher ed is failing. Y'all know
You know,
that.
yeah,
Yes, it
yeah.
was.
That was on my That was on my syllabus for the students. At the end of the evaluation thing, it was number 9, number 10, whatever the last evaluation piece was on that rubric. That's what it always said. If you do that excellently, using the textbook and all of its supplementary materials, you will receive a C.
Okay.
Now, this little basically all. There might have been one or two other kids in it, but it was European American school in one of these tiny villages, and it's totally European American. And when I went to visit with the student and the teacher said, "I just don't know how you can give a C for doing excellent work." I said, "Well, you haven't done excellent work until you research."
Yeah.
I said, "If you don't research what is in that book and find other information about that same thing, you have not done excellently. You have done what has been laid out for you excellently, but you have done nothing. Therefore, you get a C."
I don't know why I see that too.
And the teacher closed her mouth and went away. while I visited with the students to tell her when I would be visiting and when I would be doing so, because I'm sure she was not an excellent teacher. Because at that point, she closed her mouth and left. She didn't stay and join in the conversation about how you can do research. Here are some resources here at the school for you to do research. She didn't do any of that. She went away.
She didn't ask.
So she didn't ask.
She
So
got
I told her
permission.
that's what I expect. But so I say to you all, I think that good teaching takes a lot of time. So yes, in order to continually or to sneak in the African American history, if that's what you want to call it, I don't call it sneaking it in. I call it teaching history, U.S. history from everyone's perspective, which is the only way that it is taught correctly.
Hmm.
Mhm.
The I don't know, I keep thinking about the perspective. So right now the emphasis is the white European perspective. So that's why I tease and say that it's like literally everybody else have to sneak in because they want just they want the bare minimum. They really want what I grew up with. I grew up with um Martin Luther King. I didn't really understand anything about Malcolm X until I got a little older. I just knew that Martin Luther King did the "I Have a Dream" speech because we had to recite it. We had to learn about the preamble of the Constitution. We had to make sure we knew that. Um, we didn't really talk about slavery in elementary or in middle school for that matter. I think I didn't really get it until I got to high school. And then that was just, well, yeah, y'all was in it for a little while. We didn't know much more than that. So they kind of want to go back to that. They want to go back to just enough to say,
Well, they want to go back to the happy slave
yes.
narrative,
Hmm.
which is the narrative they wrote to justify slavery
Hmm.
or the enslavement of other people. Um, so actually, they want history to be the history. They want to tell history, the history of the invasion of Europeans, which they don't call invasion, they call discovery. That from that point, because they don't want to talk about the Iroquois Council, and all of that was prior to them being here. So they don't want anyone's history. They don't want the history of the United States being told. They want the history of European Americans in the United States. And they particularly want the history of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Europeans being in the country.
Hmm.
Their contributions there. Um, and they say they're designed, but they designed the government after the Iroquois Council. So therefore, it's not even their design. It
Right.
is a design that they copied from. Now it's different, but even the seating arrangement of our Congress mirrors that of the Iroquois Council. Okay.
Hmm.
So they don't want any of that told. They just want, we are these great people. We did these great things. Now everybody learn it and everybody talk about it and everybody believe that you are here by our grace.